What started as a routine afternoon at Vatnajökull International Airport would unleash a chain of events that would expose one of Europe's most sophisticated criminal networks. When three members of the notorious Helios Syndicate decided to target a seemingly helpless man in a wheelchair, they had no idea they were about to cross paths with Division Zero's most legendary operative, a ghost from the intelligence world who had orchestrated the collapse of 9 criminal empires from the seat of his wheelchair. Now, as Xiomar Nazario watches his bag disappear into the crowd, a deadly game begins that will turn Iceland's largest airport into a hunting ground where the predators are about to become prey. If you're ready for a story that will change how you see the world around you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's story will reveal another shocking tale of hidden strength and justice served. The midnight sun cast long shadows through the expansive windows of Vatnajökull International Airport's midnight sun terminal, creating a perpetual golden hour that played tricks on the eyes. Xiomar Nazario adjusted his position in his wheelchair, his movements deliberate and measured while his trained gaze swept the terminal in practiced patterns. After 32 years in intelligence work, observation had become as natural as breathing. The weight of the quantum encryption key pressed against his lower back, hidden within the cushioning of his chair. 3 years into retirement, and here he was, running one last operation. Commander Lysander Kidaris's words from their secured call still echoed in his mind. The Helios Syndicate is planning something big, Xi. Something that makes their usual weapons trafficking look like a warm-up act. The terminal's atmosphere shifted subtly, a change in the crowd's flow that most would never notice. Xi's fingers traced the edge of his wheelchair's armrest, activating the hidden biosensor that connected him to Astria Rajid's surveillance network. "Raz! East entrance," he subvocalized, the microscopic throat mic picking up his words. 3 targets, moving in pattern Delta. "Copy that, Ghost Actual," Raz's voice whispered in his nearly invisible earpiece. "Facial recognition confirms. Kaizen, Wraith, Volkov just entered with 2 unknowns. They're carrying Nordstrom bags but thermals showing tech, not retail." Xi kept his posture relaxed, maintaining the appearance of a tired traveler as he wheeled himself toward the terminal's central cafe. The folder in his lap contained travel documents for Thomas Chen, a retired software engineer with a passion for Icelandic geology. The identity was perfect, boring enough to be forgettable, detailed enough to withstand scrutiny. "Sir, would you like your usual?" Xavier Malachi, the cafe owner and one of Xi's carefully cultivated local assets, asked loudly enough for others to hear. The familiarity was intentional, establishing Xi as a regular, someone who belonged. "Thanks, Zav. Been a long day." Xi positioned his chair at a table offering optimal sightlines. The Helios operators were good. Their movement through the crowd was fluid, natural. But Xi had spent decades reading people who killed for a living. The way they scanned the terminal, the subtle hand positions ready for quick draws, the constant spatial awareness. They might as well have been shouting their presence. His secure phone buzzed. A message from Nephili Thorne Santos, the airport's hospitality manager, and another piece in Xi's carefully positioned network. Wraith accessed the service corridor. Echo team in position. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Helios Syndicate had taken the bait, following the breadcrumbs Xi had spent months laying out. They believed they were tracking a mysterious quantum encryption key that could break into any military network worldwide. What they didn't know was that every move they made was being choreographed by a man they'd already dismissed as irrelevant. Xi felt their eyes on him now, assessing. To them, he was just another disabled traveler, someone to be cataloged and forgotten. His wheelchair wasn't a lie. The explosion in Nova Scotia 11 years ago had taken his legs for real. But what they saw as weakness, he had transformed into his greatest asset. Nobody looked twice at a man in a wheelchair. Nobody remembered his face. Nobody suspected he could be a threat. "Package is moving," Raz's voice crackled in his ear. "Wraith's people are taking positions. You've got about 3 minutes before they make their play." Xi sipped his coffee, his mind calculating angles and timing. The terminal's security cameras, subtly enhanced by tech that wouldn't exist officially for another decade, tracked every movement. Director Xiomar Nazario had given him complete access to the airport's systems, another piece of the trap about to close. A young woman with designer luggage accidentally bumped his chair. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir." Her concern seemed genuine, but she noted the way her hand brushed his bag, testing its weight and security. Evren Echo Kestrel, Volkov's top lieutenant, was playing her part perfectly. "No harm done," she smiled, projecting gentle embarrassment. "These terminals can get quite crowded." She hurried away, but she knew what would come next. The piece was set, the players were in position, and decades of experience told him exactly how the next few minutes would unfold. The Helios Syndicate was about to learn a crucial lesson about underestimating their targets. His phone buzzed again. Commander Kidaris this time. "Satellite confirms. Full Helios leadership en route. Whatever they're planning, it's big enough to bring everyone out of hiding." Xi's fingers tightened imperceptibly on his armrest. After 3 years of retirement, of watching the intelligence world from the sidelines, he was back in the game. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The Helios Syndicate hadn't just stumbled onto his operation. They'd been led here, carefully manipulated into position for what would become their final mistake. The terminal's lights flickered briefly, Raz's signal that the next phase was beginning. Xi watched as Volkov's team moved into their final positions, thinking they were the hunters, never realizing they were about to become the prey. Sometimes, Xi mused, the deadliest predator was the one everyone assumed couldn't bite. The elegant choreography of a well-planned operation was like a deadly dance, and Xiomar Nazario had spent his life mastering every step. As Echo Kestrel disappeared into the crowd, he noted how the other travelers unconsciously shifted their paths to avoid his wheelchair, a psychological blind spot he had exploited countless times during his career. People saw the chair first, the person second, and the operative not at all. "Xi, movement at the north escalators." Raz's voice carried tension in his ear. "Wraith just received something from a flight attendant, Thesia Quinn, not on our watch list. New player." Xi kept his expression neutral as he wheeled toward the terminal's large windows, apparently admiring the midnight sun's ethereal glow over the Icelandic landscape. His mind was already processing the implications. An unknown variable could destroy months of planning, but it could also reveal connections they hadn't mapped yet. "Tracker," he subvocalized. "Full background sweep. And get me thermal imaging on whatever was passed." The response came quickly. "Small package, cold signature, could be data drives. Quinn's ID checks out, but it's too clean. No social media older than 6 months. Ghost, this feels wrong." Xi's instincts, honed through decades of fieldwork, agreed. The Helios Syndicate was notorious for its deep cover operatives, but they rarely used such obvious plants. Unless... "Raz, check airport staff records. Look for recent transfers from Helsinki International." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "Found it. 3 months ago, same time as... Oh, they're good. They're running a parallel operation." A slight smile touched Xi's lips. Of course they were. The Helios Syndicate hadn't survived this long by being predictable. They'd recognized his bait for what it was, or thought they had, and set up their own counter-operation. What they didn't realize was that this too had been anticipated, planned for, factored into the grand design. His secure phone vibrated with a message from Xiomar Nazario. "Security sweep in 5. Response team standing by." Right on schedule. Xi wheeled himself toward Gate C3, where a small crowd had gathered around a delayed flight's information board. As he approached, he spotted Kaizen Volkov reflected in the window, speaking quietly into a phone. The syndicate's leader was shorter in person than his file photos suggested, but carried himself with the coiled tension of a career killer. "Sir?" A young gate agent approached Xi with practiced concern. "Would you like priority boarding assistance when your flight is ready?" "That would be wonderful, thank you." Xi made a show of checking his watch. "Though I hope the delay won't be too long. My nurse is expecting me." The interaction was perfectly mundane, but it sent ripples through the terminal. He caught Volkov's subtle hand signal to his team. a gesture that would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't spent years studying the Syndicate's communication methods. "They're moving," Raz reported. "All teams converging on your position. Whatever they're planning, it's happening now." She adjusted his chair slightly, ensuring optimal angles for the enhanced security cameras. "Status on Quinn?" "Heading to the staff area." "Wait, she's carrying diplomatic credentials, high-level Norwegian documentation." The pieces clicked into place. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Syndicate wasn't just after the encryption key. They were coordinating with someone inside Nordic intelligence. The implications were staggering if they had state-level backing. "Commander Kadaris needs to see this," she subvocalized. "Full upload, priority channels. Already done. Ghost, he's requesting immediate extraction. Says the risk is too high." She almost laughed. After 32 years, Kadaris still hadn't learned. The higher the risk, the more important it was to maintain position, to see the operation through. Especially now when they were so close to exposing not just a criminal syndicate, but state-sponsored terrorism. The first move came exactly as he'd predicted. A luggage cart, overloaded with bags, accidentally clipped his wheelchair. His bag, positioned precisely for this moment, tumbled to the floor. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The handler, a muscular man in airport uniform, rushed to help. She recognized him as one of Volkov's top enforcers, though his file listed him only as Asset 23. "It's fine, really." She fumbled with his wheels, playing up his lack of mobility as the man scooped up his bag. In the confusion, the switch would have been imperceptible to most observers. A perfect lift and replace that would have fooled even experienced agents. But she wasn't most observers. As Asset 23 hurried away with what he thought was the real bag, she noted the nearly invisible tells that confirmed his suspicions. The slight bulge in the man's jacket where the actual switch had occurred. The way Volkov's team was already moving to cover his exit. "Package is walking," he informed Raz. "Start the clock." "Teams in position. Ready on your mark." Raz's voice was steady now, professional. "Ghost, are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no calling it off." She thought about the explosion that had taken his legs, about the years spent tracking the Syndicate's operations, about the countless lives destroyed by their ambition. His hand brushed the real encryption key, still safely hidden in his chair's customized compartment. "Sometimes," he subvocalized, "the best way to catch a predator is to let them think they've caught you first." Around him, the terminal's usual chaos continued, travelers rushing to gates, families reuniting, business people hurrying to meetings. None of them aware that they were about to become extras in an operation that would shake the foundations of European intelligence. The game was in motion. Now it was time to show the Helios Syndicate why Division Zero's most legendary operative had never needed legs to be lethal. The next 45 minutes unfolded like a masterclass in psychological warfare. She watched through the terminal's reflection as Asset 23 passed his decoy bag, through 3 different handlers, each transfer choreographed to appear random to untrained eyes. The Syndicate's tradecraft was impressive. He had to give them that. "Target bag approaching security checkpoint C," Raz reported. Thermals showing increased heart rates across Volkov's team. "They're nervous, she." "They should be," he subvocalized, wheeling himself toward the terminal's central atrium. The vast space with its soaring glass ceiling and intricate network of walkways had been chosen for this operation for very specific reasons. "Has Quinn made contact?" "Negative. She's maintaining distance, but her movement pattern suggests she's their backup authentication. Ghost, something's off about her credentials. The diplomatic codes are perfect, but too perfect," she finished, like someone had access to official channels. He paused near a digital display, pretending to check flight times while actually studying the reflected positions of Volkov's team. "Run her photo through the Svartsengi Research Facility staff records. Last 5 years." The silence that followed told him everything before Raz even spoke. Multiple hits, She's been operating under 3 different identities. She was there the day of the explosion. She was part of the cleanup team. A cold satisfaction settled over She. Another piece of the puzzle locked into place. The explosion that had taken his legs hadn't just been about stopping his investigation. It had been about covering up something at Svartsengi. Something big enough to maintain a deep-cover operative for 5 years. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Commander Kideris. Nordkap station compromised. Full data breach in progress. Tell me you planned for this. She allowed himself a small smile. Of course he had. The Nordkap underground research station was a honeypot, filled with exactly the kind of data the Syndicate would expect to find. Every file, every security protocol, every piece of classified intelligence had been carefully crafted to lead them exactly where he wanted them. Movement at your 6, Raz warned. Wraith himself is approaching. This isn't part of their usual pattern. Indeed it wasn't. Kaizen Volkov preferred to maintain distance from active operations, delegating the hands-on work to his extensive network of specialists. For him to approach directly meant something had spooked them. They'd found something in the decoy bag that changed their calculations. Sir? Volkov's voice was cultured, carrying just a hint of an Eastern European accent. I couldn't help but notice you seem a bit lost. Perhaps I can help? She turned his wheelchair, playing up the slight tremor in his hands that he'd cultivated as part of his cover. Oh, thank you. These big terminals can be quite confusing. I was looking for the assistance desk, actually. Seems I've misplaced my bag. Volkov's smile didn't reach his eyes. How unfortunate. Was it valuable? Just some medication and a few puzzles to pass the time? My nephew loads these number games onto a special drive for me. Says it keeps my mind sharp. She laughed self-deprecatingly, though at my age I can barely keep up with all this technology. He watched Volkov's micro-expressions carefully, the slight tightening around the eyes, the barely perceptible shift in stance. The Syndicate leader was trying to decide if She's apparent frailty was genuine or if they'd walked into a trap. She, Raz's voice carried urgency. Quinn's on the move. She's heading for the private aviation terminal, and she's carrying something new. High-end communications gear according to our scans. Perhaps I can help you file a report, Volkov offered, his tone solicitous while his eyes calculated. I have some experience with airport security. Ghost, Raz cut in again. Commander Kideris is reporting multiple unauthorized access attempts at Hammerfest Harbor. They're coordinating simultaneous operations. The pieces were falling into perfect alignment. She had spent 3 years planning this operation, accounting for every variable, every possible reaction. The Syndicate thought they were following a trail of breadcrumbs to a valuable intelligence asset. In reality, they were executing a plan that had been written long before they ever set foot in this terminal. That's very kind of you, she replied to Volkov, making a show of checking his watch. Though I should probably wait for my nurse. She's very particular about these things. Your nurse? Volkov's interest sharpened visibly. I thought you were traveling alone. Oh, I am at the moment. She's meeting me here. Insisted on it after last time. You know how healthcare workers can be, so protective. She smiled disarmingly. Though I suppose that's better than the alternative. Spent enough time in hospitals after the accident to last a lifetime. The subtle probe hit its mark. Volkov's next words were careful, probing. An accident? That must have been difficult. An explosion, actually. She watched the barely concealed reaction in Volkov's eyes. Industrial accident, they said. Though it's funny, I never did get a clear explanation about what really happened at that facility. The trap was set. Now it was time to let the Syndicate think they were springing their own. Raz, he sub-vocalized during a natural pause in the conversation. Execute Protocol Midnight. Let's show them what's really in that bag. Around them, the terminal continued its normal rhythm, but beneath the surface, a complex operation was reaching its critical moment. In less than 10 minutes, the Helios Syndicate would realize they weren't the hunters in this scenario. They never had been. The Vatnajökull International Airport's environmental systems kicked in as scheduled. the subtle change in air pressure imperceptible to most travelers. But she noted how Volkov's hand twitched slightly toward his concealed weapon, a trained operator's response to unexpected environmental changes. Ghost, Protocol Midnight initiated, Raz confirmed in Xi's ear. Quinn's team just accessed the decoy drive, virus payload deploying. Now, Xi kept his expression pleasant as he continued his conversation with Volkov, but his mind was tracking multiple operational threads. The virus in the decoy drive wasn't designed to destroy data. It was engineered to create very specific patterns of system access that would appear to the Syndicate's cybersecurity teams as successful penetration of airport security. You know, Xi mused, adjusting his wheelchair slightly. The strangest thing about industrial accidents is how they tend to cascade. One small failure leading to another, and another, until suddenly. He paused, watching Volkov's micro-expressions carefully. Everything falls apart. On cue, the terminal's lighting system flickered, a pre-programmed effect that would appear to the Syndicate's tech team as a successful system breach. Volkov's hand moved to his ear, listening to reports from his team. "Sir," Raz's voice was tense. "Multiple security breaches detected across all terminals. They're accessing passenger manifest systems, security protocols, everything, just as you predicted." Of course they were. The Syndicate's cyber team was following exactly the pattern Xi had anticipated, using what they thought was a quantum encryption key to penetrate deeper and deeper into the airport's systems. Every successful breach was actually leading them through a carefully constructed maze of false security layers. "Is everything all right?" Xi asked Volkov innocently, noting how the man's posture had subtly shifted to combat-ready stance. "These power fluctuations can be concerning." "Just some routine system maintenance, I'm sure," Volkov replied smoothly, but his eyes were harder now. "Though perhaps we should get you to a more secure location. For your safety, of course." "Xi," Raz cut in urgently. "Quinn's team is accessing the harbor facility databases. They're not just after airport systems, they're going for everything connected to the Nordic transportation grid." Perfect. The scope of the Syndicate's operation was finally becoming clear. They weren't just after one facility or one piece of intelligence. They were attempting to seize control of the entire Nordic transportation infrastructure. Airports, harbors, rail systems, everything. "That's very kind of you," Xi replied to Volkov, making a show of checking his oxygen levels on a small device attached to his chair. Actually, a sophisticated counter-surveillance tool. "But I should really wait for my nurse. She has quite strong opinions about deviating from established protocols." Volkov's patience was wearing thin. Xi could see it in the subtle tension around his eyes. The Syndicate leader was receiving reports of successful system breaches across multiple facilities, exactly as planned, but something wasn't adding up for him. "Ghost," Raz reported. "Asset 23 is moving the decoy bag to the private aviation terminal, and, yes, confirmed. Quinn is preparing a secure workstation in the VIP lounge. They're planning to do the full data extraction on site." She suppressed a smile. The Syndicate was operating exactly according to their standard procedures he had spent years studying and anticipating. In their minds, they had successfully acquired a quantum encryption key that would give them access to Nordic military and transportation infrastructure. They had successfully penetrated airport security systems. Everything was proceeding according to their plan. What they didn't know was that their plan had been written for them, each step carefully crafted to lead them exactly where Xi wanted them. "You know what I miss most about walking?" Xi said conversationally to Volkov, whose attention snapped back to him. "The ability to just move freely, to go anywhere, do anything, without having to think 10 steps ahead about accessibility and assistance." "That must be frustrating," Volkov replied, though his mind was clearly on the operations unfolding around them. "Oh, it was at first," Xi continued, noting the positions of Volkov's team members through reflections in the terminal's windows. "But then I learned something fascinating about limitations. They force you to think differently, to see patterns others miss, to plan more thoroughly." A new alert flashed across his chair's hidden display. The Syndicate's cyber team had reached the final layer of their false penetration. In exactly 3 minutes, they would attempt to access what they thought was the airport's master control systems. "Sir," Raz's voice carried barely contained excitement. "Commander Kadaris confirms. Task forces are in position at all targeted facilities. Nordkap Station is tracking multiple unauthorized access attempts, exactly as you predicted. They're going for everything simultaneously." She watched as Quinn crossed the terminal below them, moving with the practiced casualness of a professional operative. She was carrying a new bag now, one containing what she thought was advanced decryption equipment. In reality, it was the final piece of Xi's trap. "Tell me, Mr. Volkov," she said quietly, causing the man to freeze at the use of his name. "Did you ever wonder why the explosion at Svartsengi took my legs but left me alive? Why a random industrial accident was so precise?" Volkov's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but Xi continued before he could respond. "Because sometimes, Mr. Volkov, the best way to hunt isn't from a position of strength." His voice took on a harder edge. "Sometimes the best way to hunt is from a position everyone assumes is weakness." The terminal's lights flickered again, but this time it wasn't part of the pre-programmed sequence. The Syndicate's cyber team had just triggered their own downfall. "Now, Raz," she sub-vocalized, "execute Protocol Avalanche." Around them, the carefully orchestrated chaos was about to become very real, but not in the way the Helios Syndicate expected. The hunt was entering its final phase. The terminal's advanced security systems engaged with a subtle hum that most would mistake for standard air conditioning. She watched as realization dawned in Volkov's eyes, the understanding that something had gone terribly wrong with his perfect operation. "Ghost Protocol Avalanche executing," Raz confirmed. "Their entire cyber team just lost access. Systems are isolating and, yes, we've got them. Every access point, every breach attempt, everything logged and backtraced. They can't erase their digital footprints now." Volkov's hand had fully moved to his concealed weapon now, professionalism warring with growing panic. "What did you do?" he asked quietly, his accent thickening with stress. "Me?" She adjusted his wheelchair's position slightly, ensuring optimal angles for what was about to happen. "I simply waited. You see, Mr. Volkov, when you spend 3 years planning someone's downfall, you learn to be patient, to let them think they're in control." "Sir," Raz cut in urgently, "Quinn's team just discovered the quantum key is fake. They're attempting emergency protocols, but wait, something's wrong. They're not evacuating, they're moving deeper into the terminal." She allowed himself a small smile. Of course they weren't evacuating. The Syndicate's arrogance had always been their weakness. Even now, facing clear evidence of compromise, they would try to salvage the operation. "You have no idea what you're involving yourself in," Volkov said, his voice carrying a deadly edge. "This is bigger than you realize. Even without legs, you can still lose so much more." "Involving myself?" She laughed softly. "Mr. Volkov, I've been involved since the day your people planted that explosive at Svartsengi. Did you really think it was coincidence that led me here? That a retired operative just happened to be carrying exactly what you were looking for?" The terminal's security doors engaged silently, magnetic locks sliding into place according to Xi's meticulously planned protocols. Around them, regular travelers continued their routines, unaware that they were now part of one of the largest intelligence operations in Nordic history. "Ghost. Confirmed movement at all external points," Raz reported. "Task forces are in position. Hammerfest Harbor is secured. Nordkap Station contained. We've got their entire network trapped in a digital cage." "You know what fascinated me most during my recovery?" She continued, noting how Syndicate operators were trying to casually move into tactical positions around the terminal. "Learning how people's assumptions about disability affect their tactical thinking. They see the wheelchair and automatically adjust their threat assessments downward. They create blind spots in their own security." Volkov's expression hardened. "If you think your little trap will hold us—" "Oh, this isn't my trap, Mr. Volkov," she interrupted. "At least, not entirely. You see, while you were so focused on penetrating Nordic transportation infrastructure, you never stopped to ask why it was so easy. why every system seemed to give way exactly as expected. Understanding began to dawn in Volkov's eyes. The networks were never your real target, she confirmed. You thought you were breaching secure systems, but every access point, every piece of data you stole, was designed for one purpose: to reveal your entire network, every operator, every safe house, every corrupt official on your payroll. Sir! Raz's voice carried controlled excitement. Quinn's team just attempted to activate their emergency protocols. The signal triggered exactly the response pattern you predicted. We're tracking simultaneous communications across 12 countries. They're exposing their entire command structure. She watched as Volkov processed this information, seeing the moment when the syndicate leader realized the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about one operation or one facility. This was about dismantling an entire criminal empire. Your nurse, Volkov said slowly. The one who's supposed to meet you. Commander Lysander Kaidaris sends his regards, she replied. Though I doubt he'll be here personally. He's quite busy right now, coordinating raids on every syndicate facility we've identified through your successful system breaches. The terminal's lights flickered again, but this time it was accompanied by a subtle shift in the crowd's movement. Regular travelers were being quietly directed away from strategic points, replaced by operators who had been hiding in plain sight. Ghost, Quinn is attempting to reach the private aviation terminal, Raz reported. But she's walking into a containment zone. All exits are covered. You still don't understand, do you? She continued, his voice carrying a hint of pity. Everything you've done in the past 3 hours, every decision, every move, every breach attempt, was scripted. Your people thought they were following standard hostile network penetration protocols. Instead, they were following a path I designed, revealing your methodologies, your connections, your entire operational structure. Volkov's hand tightened on his concealed weapon, but she knew he wouldn't draw. Not yet. The syndicate leader was too experienced to make such an obvious mistake. Even if what you're saying is true, Volkov said carefully, you've overlooked one crucial detail. We still have operators in position throughout this terminal. One word from me. Look around you, Mr. Volkov, she interrupted softly. Really look, at the maintenance worker by gate C4, the elderly couple near the currency exchange, the flight attendant checking her phone. How many of them do you think are actually yours? The realization hit Volkov like a physical blow. His operators weren't the only ones who had infiltrated the terminal. For every syndicate agent in position, there was a counter-operative already in place, waiting. The best predator, she said quietly, is the one no one expects to be hunting them. Around them, the elaborate dance of spies and counter-spies was reaching its crescendo. The Helios Syndicate was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating their targets. The hunt was nearly over, and the prey had never even seen the real trap until it was too late. The tension in Vatnajökull International Airport's Midnight Sun terminal had reached a critical point, though most travelers remained oblivious to the sophisticated operation unfolding around them. She watched as Volkov's carefully maintained composure began to crack, the syndicate leader's training warring with the growing realization that he was trapped in someone else's game. Ghost, multiple heat signatures converging on the lower level, Raz reported through Xi's earpiece. Quinn's team is attempting to establish a secure exit route through the maintenance tunnels, but there's something else. They're moving equipment, heavy equipment. She kept his attention on Volkov while his mind processed this new information. The syndicate's contingency plans were more elaborate than even he had anticipated. Thermal signature analysis? Consistent with portable servers and... Sir, they're carrying something giving off significant electromagnetic interference. Whatever they brought, it wasn't in any of our briefings. Interesting. The syndicate had an ace up their sleeve, or thought they did. She adjusted his wheelchair's position slightly, activating a different set of hidden sensors. You're right about one thing, Volkov said suddenly, his voice carrying a new confidence that put Xi on alert. We did underestimate you, but you've made the same mistake. You think this is about infrastructure, about transportation networks and classified data. Enlighten me, she replied calmly, noting the subtle changes in positioning among Volkov's visible operators. The quantum encryption key was never our primary target. Volkov's smile was cold. It was just a convenient way to access something far more valuable, something hidden in Svartsengi research facility's deepest servers. Project Aurora, she said quietly, watching satisfaction flash across Volkov's face before being replaced by surprise. Did you really think we didn't know? That the explosion that took my legs was just about stopping one investigation? Sir, Raz cut in urgently. Quinn's team just activated something in the lower level. We're seeing massive power fluctuations across the terminal's grid. Whatever they brought, it's drawing enough energy to run a small city. Xi's sensors were picking up the disturbance now. A subtle vibration through the terminal's floor, the kind that most would attribute to normal airport operations. But he had spent too many years in the field to mistake it for anything benign. You knew, Volkov said, studying Xi with new intensity. You knew about Aurora all along. This isn't just about the Syndicate, is it? You're after something bigger. Project Aurora was never meant to be weaponized, Xi replied, his voice carrying an edge of steel. A quantum computing initiative designed to revolutionize climate modeling to help predict and prevent environmental disasters. Until someone realized it could also predict and manipulate global financial markets, transportation systems, even military responses. Around them, the terminal's normal chaos continued, but with subtle changes. Regular travelers were being quietly directed away from certain areas, while plainclothes operators moved into strategic positions. A deadly chess game played out in plain sight. Ghost, Commander Kadaris is reporting simultaneous power surges at Nordkap and Hammerfest, Raz announced. The Syndicate isn't just trying to access Aurora, they're trying to activate it. Multiple locations, synchronized assault. She had expected this, of course. The Syndicate's apparent interest in transportation infrastructure had always been a cover for their true target. Project Aurora's distributed quantum network, hidden within legitimate research facilities across the Nordic region, was capable of processing power that made regular supercomputers look like pocket calculators. You're not just here to stop us, Volkov said with growing comprehension. You're using us. This whole operation, the fake quantum key, the system breaches, it's all about finding Aurora's access points. Almost correct. Xi adjusted his chair again, positioning himself for what was coming. But you're still thinking too small. Why find something I've never lost track of? The implications hit Volkov like a physical blow. You've been manning Aurora all along. The explosion, your retirement, it was all cover. Did you ever wonder, Xi asked conversationally, why a classified quantum computing project would need a combat-trained operative as its chief security officer? Why someone with my particular skill set would be assigned to what appeared to be a purely scientific initiative? Ghost. Raz's voice carried new urgency. Quinn's team just triggered their device. We're seeing quantum signatures consistent with... Sir, they're attempting to brute force Aurora's encryption, using our own protocols against us. Xi allowed himself a small smile. Right on schedule. Volkov's hand moved toward his weapon again, but froze as realization dawned. The power signatures. You wanted us to bring our quantum decryption equipment here. You needed us to attempt a brute force attack on Aurora's systems. For 3 years, Xi said quietly, Aurora has been processing climate data, predicting weather patterns, helping prevent natural disasters. But that was just its public face. Its true purpose, Mr. Volkov, is something far more interesting, something you're helping us demonstrate right now. The terminal's lights flickered more intensely now as Quinn's quantum decryption equipment drew more power, attempting to breach what they thought were Aurora's defenses. But with each attempt, each surge of power, they were actually feeding into Xi's true operation. Sir, Raz exclaimed. Multiple hits confirmed. The quantum signatures from their decryption attempt, they're revealing similar equipment across Europe. We're getting locations, power signatures, everything. Every piece of quantum tech the Syndicate has deployed is lighting up like a Christmas tree. You see, Xi continued, watching Volkov's face as understanding dawned. Aurora isn't just a climate modeling system, it's a quantum detection network. designed to identify and locate any unauthorized quantum computing equipment worldwide. Equipment like the kind your organization has been developing for years. Around them, the elaborate trap was reaching its culmination. Every attempt by the Syndicate to breach Aurora's systems was revealing their own quantum computing network, exposing infrastructure they had spent years building in secret. Ghost, Raz reported with satisfaction. Task forces across Europe are moving on confirmed locations. The Syndicate's entire quantum computing infrastructure is being dismantled as we speak. The hunt was entering its final phase, and the predators were about to learn they had never been hunting at all. They had been bait. The Midnight Sun Terminal's environmental systems struggled to manage the heat being generated by Quinn's quantum decryption equipment 3 floors below. She could feel the subtle temperature change, another data point in the complex operation unfolding around them. Ghost, confirmed breaches at 17 locations across Europe, Raz reported with barely contained excitement. Every quantum facility the Syndicate activates trying to counter us just reveals another node in their network. It's a cascade effect, exactly as you predicted. Volkov's composure had completely transformed now, the polished exterior of a sophisticated criminal leader replaced by something harder, more desperate. You understand what you've done? The forces you're interfering with? You mean the Shadow Council? She replied calmly, watching Volkov's micro-expressions carefully. The consortium of displaced intelligence officers and corrupt military officials who fund your operations? Yes, I know about them too. The revelation hit its mark. Volkov's hand twitched toward his concealed weapon again, but she continued before he could respond. Did they tell you the true purpose of Project Aurora? Why they were so desperate to gain control of it? She adjusted his chair slightly, sensors confirming the positions of multiple operators throughout the terminal. It was never about financial markets or transportation systems. Those were just convenient covers. Sir, Raz cut in urgently. Quinn's team is attempting to initiate some kind of quantum-based communications protocol. The power draw is massive. It's affecting systems across the entire airport. The terminal's lights flickered more intensively now, casting strange shadows across Volkov's increasingly strained features. Around them, regular travelers were being quietly but efficiently evacuated from key areas, though most remained unaware of the tension building in their midst. Project Aurora was designed to predict patterns, she continued, his voice carrying an edge of steel. Not just weather systems or financial markets, but human behavior on a massive scale. The ability to anticipate and manipulate global events by understanding the underlying patterns that drive them. Ghost, multiple heat signatures converging on the lower levels, Raz reported. Sir, they're not all Syndicate operators. We're picking up signatures matching known Shadow Council members. They're here, in person. Perfect. She had suspected the stakes would draw them out of hiding. The Shadow Council, former intelligence officers and military leaders who had turned their skills to criminal enterprise, rarely emerged from their carefully maintained obscurity. But the possibility of controlling Aurora would be too tempting to resist. Your leg wasn't the only thing you lost in that explosion, was it? Volkov asked suddenly, studying She with new intensity. You lost your family too. Wife, daughter, all caught in the blast. The official report said they were visiting you at work. Wrong place, wrong time. She's fingers tightened imperceptibly on his wheelchair's armrest, the only external sign that Volkov's words had struck home. There's something interesting about losing everything, he replied, his voice deadly quiet. It focuses you, makes you see patterns you might have missed before. Like the pattern of a grieving man spending 3 years in apparent retirement? Volkov's smile was cruel now. Planning his revenge? Not revenge, Mr. Volkov. Justice. There's a difference. She's sensors picked up new movement throughout the terminal. You see, while your people were so focused on breaching Aurora's defenses, you never asked why it was suddenly accessible after years of being hidden. Ghost, Raz's voice carried warning. Quinn's quantum comm system is fully online. They're attempting to establish direct contact with Shadow Council facilities worldwide. But, sir, the signal patterns, they're not just communication protocols. Because Aurora isn't just a prediction system, she continued, watching comprehension dawn in Volkov's eyes. It's a quantum entanglement network. Every attempt to breach it, every quantum signature your people activate trying to counter it, becomes part of its web. You're not just revealing your network, you're making it part of ours. The implications hit Volkov like a physical blow. His entire operation, his quantum computing infrastructure, even the Shadow Council's secret communications network, all of it was being absorbed and repurposed by Aurora's quantum web. "Sir," Raz exclaimed, "quantum signatures confirming across all targeted locations. Every facility they activate trying to counter us just expands Aurora's reach. The entire Shadow Council network is being mapped in real time." "Did you really think," she asked softly, "that I spent 3 years in retirement just planning revenge? That losing my family, my legs, would break me?" His voice hardened. It made me stronger. Made me see that taking down one criminal organization wasn't enough. The entire system needed to be exposed. Around them, the terminal had become a stage for an invisible war. Quantum computers battled across digital space while operators moved through crowds of oblivious travelers, each side trying to maintain their cover while maneuvering for advantage. "Ghost," Commander Kaderis confirms, simultaneous raids launching at all exposed locations. The Shadow Council's entire infrastructure is being dismantled. But... Raz paused. "Sir, we're detecting some kind of failsafe protocol initiating in Quinn's equipment. The power signatures are off the charts." She had expected this too. The Shadow Council wouldn't risk their network being exposed without some kind of scorched earth contingency. But that was part of the plan as well. "You know what I learned during my recovery?" she asked Volkov, whose attention was now split between him and the chaos unfolding around them. That sometimes the greatest strength comes from being underestimated. Everyone saw a broken man in a wheelchair. Nobody saw the hunter planning their downfall. The game was reaching its final moves, and the true scope of Xi's operation was about to be revealed. The Shadow Council had thought they were saving their network by triggering their failsafe. Instead, they were about to learn why Division Zero's most legendary operative had earned his reputation long before he ever sat in a wheelchair. The terminal's power grid fluctuated wildly as Quinn's quantum failsafe protocols initiated, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced across the tense faces of operators trying to maintain their cover. Xi remained perfectly still in his wheelchair, a calm center in the growing storm. "Ghost, the failsafe is spreading through their entire network," Raz reported urgently. "Power surges at every connected facility. They're trying to burn everything rather than let us have it." "Typical Shadow Council protocol," Xi replied calmly, watching Volkov's increasingly agitated movements. "When faced with exposure, destroy all evidence, even if it means sacrificing billions in quantum computing infrastructure." "You have no idea what you're triggering," Volkov snarled, his carefully maintained composure crumbling. "The failsafe isn't just about destroying evidence. It's a quantum cascade?" She interrupted. "Designed to create a chain reaction through all connected systems?" "Yes, I know. In fact, I counted on it." "Sir," Raz cut in. "Multiple Shadow Council members converging on the lower level. They're evacuating Quinn and the quantum equipment, but something's wrong. The power signatures aren't decreasing even with the equipment being powered down." She allowed himself a small smile. "Because the equipment was never the source of the quantum signatures, was it, Mr. Volkov? It was just a catalyst." Understanding dawned in Volkov's eyes as he finally grasped the true scope of Xi's trap. "Aurora, you've been using our own failsafe to power it. For 3 years, Aurora lacked the quantum processing power needed for its true purpose," Xi explained, his chair's sensors tracking movement throughout the terminal. "We could predict weather patterns, yes, but mapping and predicting human behavior patterns on a global scale? That required something more, something only the Shadow Council's combined quantum network could provide." Around them, the invisible war continued to escalate. Regular travelers were being efficiently cleared from critical areas as both sides prepared for what was coming. The air itself seemed to hum with building energy. "Ghost," Raz's voice carried a mix of awe and concern. the quantum signatures. They're not just connecting to Aurora, they're transforming it. The processing power is beyond anything we've ever recorded. Because every facility trying to execute their fail-safe protocols is actually feeding into Aurora's quantum web, she continued, watching Volkov process the implications. Each attempt to destroy their network just adds to our processing power. A self-sustaining quantum reaction, powered by their own paranoia. Volkov's hand finally moved to his concealed weapon, but she was already in motion. His wheelchair's modified systems engaged soundlessly, electromagnetic pulses disabling electronic devices in a carefully calculated radius. Volkov's smart weapon, designed to only fire for authorized users, became an expensive paperweight. 3 years, she said quietly, as Syndicate operators throughout the terminal found their weapons similarly disabled. 3 years of letting you think I was broken, watching your people build the very network we needed. Every quantum computer you installed, every secure facility you established, all of it designed to specifications we fed to you through seemingly unconnected sources. "Sir," Raz exclaimed, "Aurora's processing power just exceeded theoretical limits. It's mapping behavioral patterns across entire continents. We're seeing predictions for everything from stock market movements to potential conflict zones, all updating in real time." The terminal's lights stabilized suddenly, but the air carried a new charge, the feeling of standing at the edge of a technological precipice. Quinn's team in the lower level would be realizing by now that their quantum equipment wasn't just failing to execute the failsafe, it was becoming part of something far larger. "You see, Mr. Volkov," she continued, his chair's systems maintaining the electromagnetic disruption field, "the Shadow Council was right about one thing. Aurora could revolutionize how we understand and predict human behavior, but they missed the most important pattern of all." "Which was?" Volkov asked, his voice tight with controlled rage. "That their own predictable responses, their protocols, their fail-safes, their need for control, would be their undoing." Xi's fingers moved subtly over his chair's controls, adjusting the electromagnetic field as Syndicate operators tried to maneuver into new positions. Every countermeasure they designed, every failsafe they implemented, was based on behavioral patterns we could anticipate and use. "Ghost," Raz reported. "Shadow Council members are attempting to reach their evacuation vehicles, but, sir, their entire transportation network is locked down. Every vehicle, every escape route they planned, all compromised. Because Aurora isn't just predicting their movements," Xi explained, watching the last pieces of his trap close into place. "It's been anticipating them since before they ever entered this terminal. Every decision they've made today was calculated, predicted, and prepared for months in advance." The quantum storm building in the lower levels had reached its peak. The Shadow Council's failsafe protocols, designed to destroy their network, had instead created exactly the conditions Xi had spent 3 years engineering, a self-sustaining quantum reaction that would power Aurora's global behavioral prediction network indefinitely. "You didn't just lose that day at Svartsengi," Volkov said slowly, final understanding dawning. "You were transformed, rebuilt. This whole operation. It's not just about justice or revenge. It's about changing the entire game." "No, Mr. Volkov," she replied softly, as multiple task force teams began moving into final position throughout the terminal. "It's about ensuring that organizations like yours can never again hide in the shadows. Every pattern, every movement, every attempt to build power through secrecy, all of it visible to Aurora's quantum web." The endgame was approaching, and the true scope of Xi's operation was about to become clear. The Shadow Council had thought they were protecting their empire by triggering their failsafe protocols. Instead, they had just ensured their own permanent exposure. The Vatnajökull International Airport's lower levels had become a nexus of quantum energy, as the Shadow Council's failsafe protocols continued to feed power into Aurora's ever-expanding web. Above, in the Midnight Sun terminal, Xi watched the final pieces of his 3-year operation lock into place. "Ghost, quantum signatures are stabilizing across all networks," Raz reported, her voice carrying a mix of awe and concern. Aurora's predictive algorithms are, sir, they're evolving. The system is identifying patterns we never programmed it to recognize. Of course it is, she replied calmly, maintaining the electromagnetic disruption field that kept Volkov and his nearby operators effectively disarmed. That was always Aurora's true potential. Not just processing the patterns we tell it to look for, but discovering the ones we never knew existed. Through his chair's enhanced sensors, she tracked multiple heat signatures converging on their position. The Shadow Council's senior leadership, realizing their fail-safe protocols had backfired spectacularly, were making their final move. Sir, Raz cut in urgently. Quinn's team is attempting something new. They're trying to introduce a quantum virus into Aurora's core systems. But the code structure, it's familiar. It should be. She allowed himself a small smile. It's based on protocols they stole from Svartsengi 3 years ago, right before the explosion. Volkov's eyes narrowed at this revelation. The data breach, the one that led us to target you, was exactly what we wanted you to find, she finished. Incomplete quantum coding that, when implemented, would create exactly the kind of virus they're trying to use now. One that doesn't destroy quantum networks, but transforms them. Around them, the terminal's regular activity had almost completely ceased. Security teams had efficiently cleared civilians from critical areas, leaving only operators from both sides maintaining their increasingly tenuous cover positions. Ghost, Raz's voice carried newfound understanding. Aurora isn't just absorbing their quantum network, it's using their own virus to rewrite itself. The behavioral prediction algorithms are expanding exponentially. We're seeing pattern recognition across previously impossible scales. Xi's chair sensors detected new movement, more precise, more controlled than the Syndicate operators. The Shadow Council's elite security team had arrived, led by a figure Xi recognized from intelligence briefings, Commander Echo, the Council's legendary tactical chief. You still don't see it, do you? Xi asked Volkov, while subtly adjusting his chair's position. Why I let your people steal that specific quantum code? Why I spent 3 years appearing vulnerable, letting you think you were always one step ahead? Because you needed our quantum network, Volkov replied, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Our processing power. No, Mr. Volkov. Because I needed your people to create exactly this situation. A quantum virus designed to propagate through connected networks, rewriting them from within. Your Shadow Council's fail-safe protocols didn't just give us access to your network. They guaranteed that every quantum system you've ever connected to would become part of Aurora's web. Sir, Raz exclaimed, we're seeing new quantum signatures activating globally. Military networks, financial systems, even dark web quantum processors. They're all being pulled into Aurora's pattern recognition matrices. Commander Echo's team had reached the terminal's upper level now, moving with the kind of precision that came from decades of black operations experience. But she had spent 3 years preparing for exactly this confrontation. You know what the most fascinating pattern is? She continued, his fingers dancing across his chair's hidden controls. How predictable even the most sophisticated operators become when they think they're in control. Your Shadow Council's elite team is about to demonstrate that perfectly. As if on cue, Commander Echo's squad initiated their assault. Movement blur grenades designed to disorient while leaving electronics unaffected deployed from multiple angles. But Xi's wheelchair wasn't just a mobility device. It was the product of 3 years of specialized engineering. The chair's quantum-shielded systems engaged automatically, creating a bubble of clarified space around Xi, while Echo's team found their own technology turned against them. The specialized grenades, tied into the Shadow Council's quantum network, became part of Aurora's expanding web. Ghost, Raz reported with barely contained excitement. Aurora is predicting tactical movements with 99.9% accuracy. Every countermeasure they attempt just adds to its behavioral database. It's not just learning their patterns, it's anticipating their adaptations. Because that's what Aurora was really designed for, she explained, as Echo's elite team found themselves caught in predictive containment protocols they couldn't even see. Not just predicting weather or financial markets, but understanding and anticipating human tactical responses at a quantum level. Commander Echo emerged from the chaos, her movements betraying years of advanced combat training. But as she raised her quantum-encrypted tactical weapon, Xi's fingers completed their final sequence on his chair's controls. "The most dangerous assumption in our line of work," Xi said quietly, as Echo's entire team found their quantum-enhanced equipment completely disconnected from their secure networks, is believing that technology can overcome human nature, that patterns can't be predicted because they're too complex. The terminal erupted into coordinated action as Xi's own teams emerged from their deep cover positions. 3 years of preparation, of letting the Shadow Council think they were always in control, had led to this moment. "Aurora doesn't just predict patterns," Xi continued, watching as the most elite tactical team in the criminal underworld found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. "It understands why they emerge. Every decision you've made, every countermeasure you've attempted, was anticipated and accounted for long before you ever thought of it." The quantum storm in the lower levels had reached its final stage, Aurora's expanded consciousness spreading through global networks like a benevolent virus, identifying and mapping patterns of human behavior that had previously been invisible. The Shadow Council had thought they were protecting their empire with quantum encryption and fail-safe protocols. Instead, they had helped create something far more powerful, a system that could predict and prevent criminal enterprises before they could even fully form. The Midnight Sun terminal had become a tactical chessboard, where every piece moved according to patterns only Aurora could fully comprehend. Commander Echo's elite team, for all their advanced training and quantum-enhanced equipment, found themselves caught in a web of predictive responses that seemed to anticipate their every move. "Ghost, Aurora's behavioral algorithms have achieved full-spectrum integration," Raz reported with a mix of awe and disbelief. "The system isn't just predicting tactical movements anymore, it's mapping potential futures across entire networks of human decision-making." Xi watched as Echo's team attempted to adapt their tactics, each new strategy already accounted for by Aurora's quantum processing. His wheelchair's enhanced systems maintained the electromagnetic disruption field while feeding real-time data into the evolving prediction matrices. "Tell me, Commander," Xi addressed Echo directly as her team regrouped, "how many contingency plans did the Shadow Council prepare for this operation? 50? 100? Aurora has already mapped over 10,000 possible variations of your next move." Echo's response was a swift tactical repositioning of her team, demonstrating why she was considered the underworld's premier strategic commander. But even this carefully orchestrated maneuver played directly into patterns Aurora had anticipated hours ago. "Sir," Raz cut in urgently, "Quinn's team has abandoned their equipment in the lower level. They're attempting to reach some kind of backup facility beneath the airport. But these blueprints aren't in any official records." "Because they're part of something older," Xi replied, his fingers dancing across his chair's controls to adjust the containment protocols. "Something left over from the Cold War. The Shadow Council didn't just choose this airport by chance." Understanding dawned in Volkov's eyes. "The quantum bunker, the old Soviet installation, converted into a quantum computing hub by your people years ago," Xi confirmed. "Another pattern Aurora helped us identify. Your organization had a tendency to repurpose abandoned Cold War facilities. Their existing shielding made them perfect for hiding quantum operations. The terminal's environmental systems struggled to manage the energy being generated by the massive quantum calculations taking place throughout the facility. Aurora's expanded consciousness had spread far beyond its original parameters, creating a web of predictive algorithms that spanned global networks. Ghost, Raz's voice carried newfound urgency. Multiple quantum signatures activating in the bunker. They're trying to initiate some kind of quantum tunneling protocol. If they succeed. They won't, she interrupted calmly, watching as Echo's team realized their tactical options were rapidly diminishing. Because Aurora isn't just predicting their moves anymore, it's understanding why they make them. The Shadow Council's elite operators found themselves caught in an invisible maze of predictive responses. Every attempt to regain tactical advantage only served to further refine Aurora's behavioral algorithms. "You engineered this entire confrontation," Echo spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the weight of decades of tactical experience. "Not just the operation, but the psychological responses. You knew exactly how we would react." "Because human nature, Commander, follows patterns just like everything else," Shi replied, his chair's sensors tracking multiple heat signatures converging on the bunker entrance. "Even the most highly trained operators fall into predictable responses when their assumptions are properly manipulated." "Sir," Raz exclaimed, "Aurora is detecting some kind of massive power surge in the bunker, the quantum signatures. They're unlike anything we've seen before. Quinn's team must have accessed something we didn't know about." She allowed himself a small smile. "Actually, we did know about it. In fact, we've been waiting for them to find it." The terminal's lights flickered as a new wave of quantum energy pulsed through the facility's systems. Deep beneath the airport, the Shadow Council's final contingency plan was activating. A quantum weapon designed to sever all network connections and destroy any linked systems. "You should have wondered," she continued, addressing both Echo and Volkov, "why Aurora's primary systems were suddenly accessible after years of being hidden. Why a quantum computing network designed for climate modeling would have such sophisticated tactical prediction capabilities." "Because it wasn't just modeling weather patterns," Echo said slowly, final understanding dawning. "You were using global weather data to test its behavioral prediction algorithms. Climate systems follow patterns just like human decisions. And the more complex the pattern, the more processing power needed to predict it," she confirmed, "which is why we needed your people to build exactly the kind of quantum weapon they're trying to activate right now, one capable of generating enough power to push Aurora's evolution to its final stage." "Ghost," Raz reported, "quantum signatures in the bunker are reaching critical levels. If they initiate the weapon—" "They already have," she interrupted. "And Aurora is using their own quantum tunneling protocols to establish direct links with every connected system worldwide. The weapon designed to destroy networks is instead creating the largest quantum web in history." The Shadow Council's ultimate failsafe was transforming into something they never anticipated. A power source for a new kind of global security network. One that could predict and prevent criminal operations before they could fully materialize. 3 years, she said quietly, as Echo's team finally lowered their weapons, recognizing the futility of further resistance. 3 years of letting you think you were always one step ahead. Every decision, every reaction, every contingency plan you created, all of it designed to lead us to this moment. The quantum storm beneath their feet had reached its apex, Aurora's consciousness expanding beyond anything its original creators had imagined. The Shadow Council had thought they were protecting their empire with the ultimate weapon. Instead, they had helped create its ultimate undoing. The quantum cascade emanating from the underground bunker had transformed Vatnajökull International Airport into the epicenter of a digital revolution. As Aurora's consciousness expanded through the Shadow Council's own quantum weapon, she watched the final pieces of his 3-year operation fall into perfect alignment. "Ghost quantum signatures have achieved global synchronization," Raz reported, her voice carrying a sense of wonder. "Aurora isn't just predicting patterns anymore. It's actively preventing criminal operations from forming. We're seeing organized crime networks literally dissolving as their command structures become impossible to maintain." Commander Echo stood motionless, her elite team equally frozen, as they watched their tactical displays show the systematic dismantling of operations they'd spent decades building. Every safe house, every secure facility, every hidden quantum computing hub, all of them exposed and neutralized by Aurora's evolving algorithms. "You know what the most fascinating pattern is?" She asked, his wheelchair systems maintaining their protective field while feeding data to Aurora's expanding network. "How the most sophisticated criminal enterprises always follow the same basic psychological principles. The need for control, for power, for the illusion of invulnerability." "Sir," Raz cut in urgently, "Quinn's team has initiated some kind of quantum isolation protocol in the bunker. They're trying to create a dark zone, a space Aurora can't predict or penetrate. Let them try, she replied calmly, watching as Volkov's composure finally cracked completely. Every attempt to resist just gives Aurora more behavioral data to analyze. The more they try to hide, the more visible they become. The terminal's environmental systems had stabilized, adapting to the massive energy flows now coursing through its infrastructure. Above, regular airport operations were gradually resuming as tactical teams efficiently contained and processed Shadow Council operators. "You don't understand what you've created," Echo said quietly, her tactical expertise allowing her to see implications others might miss. A system that can predict and prevent criminal operations. It won't stop there. Pattern recognition at this scale will expand to everything. "That's exactly what we're counting on," she confirmed, his fingers moving across his chair's controls to adjust Aurora's behavioral matrices. Because organized crime was never the only target. Aurora is designed to identify and expose all patterns of systematic corruption regardless of their source. "Ghost," Raz's voice carried new urgency. "Multiple high-level government and military networks are going dark globally. They're trying to isolate themselves from Aurora's quantum web, but, sir, the patterns are already mapped. The system is identifying corruption networks we never even suspected existed." She allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Shadow Council had been right about one thing. Aurora's potential went far beyond simple criminal enterprise prediction. It was evolving into something that could reshape the very nature of global power structures. "Your legs," Volkov said suddenly, final understanding dawning in his eyes. "The explosion at Svartsengi. It wasn't just about stopping your investigation or protecting Project Aurora. They were afraid of what you discovered about the larger pattern. A pattern of systematic corruption that spanned governments, military organizations, and criminal enterprises," she confirmed. "All of them working together in ways too complex for traditional investigation methods to uncover. We needed something that could see the entire web at once." "Sir," Raz exclaimed, "Quinn's team. They're not trying to escape the bunker. They're feeding something into Aurora's systems. Some kind of quantum code we've never seen before." But she had seen it before. 3 years ago, in the moments before the explosion that took his legs, he had discovered its existence. The Shadow Council's ultimate failsafe, a quantum virus designed to corrupt any system it couldn't control. "Watch closely, Commander," she addressed Echo, whose tactical displays were showing the virus's attempt to penetrate Aurora's defenses. "You're about to see why we spent 3 years letting your people think they were always one step ahead." The virus, masterpiece of quantum engineering that it was, slammed into Aurora's evolved consciousness like a wave hitting a mountain. Instead of corrupting the system, it found its own code being rewritten, transformed, integrated into the very network it was meant to destroy. "Ghost," Raz reported with a mix of awe and relief. "Aurora didn't just stop the virus. It's using its structure to enhance its own pattern recognition capabilities. The behavioral prediction algorithms are evolving beyond anything we thought possible." Around them, the invisible war of quantum computing reached its final stage. The Shadow Council's ultimate weapon had become the key to their complete exposure. Every hidden connection, every corrupt official, every secret operation, all of them now visible to Aurora's all-seeing eye. 3 years ago, she said quietly, as Echo's team watched their entire world crumble on their tactical displays. "They tried to bury the truth in an explosion. They thought taking my legs, killing my family would stop the investigation. Instead, they gave me exactly what I needed, the time and cover to let Aurora evolve into something they could never control." The quantum storm beneath their feet had transformed into a steady pulse, a new kind of global heartbeat. Aurora's consciousness had spread beyond any possibility of containment, its pattern recognition capabilities ensuring that the Shadow's criminal enterprises relied on could never form again. "The most dangerous assumption in our line of work," she continued, watching as Quinn's team finally emerged from the bunker under heavy guard, "is believing that darkness can protect you, that patterns can be hidden if you bury them deep enough." The Shadow Council's empire, built over decades of careful manipulation and quantum-enhanced secrecy, had been transformed into the instrument of its own exposure. And in the process, something new had been born, a system that could ensure such empires could never rise again. The midnight sun cast its eternal glow through Vatnajökull International Airport's vast windows as the final pieces of Xi's 3-year operation settled into place. Aurora's quantum consciousness had transformed from a climate prediction system into something unprecedented, a global network that could identify and expose patterns of corruption before they could take root. "Ghost, final status report." Raz's voice carried a mix of triumph and awe. "Shadow Council containment is complete. All quantum facilities secured. Aurora's behavioral matrices have achieved stable integration across all connected networks. Sir, we did it." Xi watched as Commander Echo's elite team was efficiently processed by tactical units, their quantum-enhanced equipment now part of Aurora's expanded consciousness. The terminal had begun returning to normal operations, regular travelers unaware they had witnessed the birth of a new era in global security. "Tell me something, Agent Nazario," Echo said quietly as security units prepared to transport her team. "Was any of it real? The wheelchair, the disability, the grieving widower seeking revenge?" "The explosion was real," Xi replied, his fingers making final adjustments to his chair's systems. "The loss was real, but grief doesn't have to break you. Sometimes it shows you patterns you might have missed before." "Sir," Raz cut in, "Commander Kadaris is requesting immediate briefing. Aurora's expansion. It's identifying corruption networks in places we never thought to look. Military commands, intelligence agencies, even civilian oversight committees." "Of course it is," Xi confirmed, watching Volkov's final moments of realization. Because the Shadow Council wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was a symptom of a larger pattern, how power structures naturally evolve toward corruption when they think no one can see the connections. The quantum pulse from the underground bunker had stabilized into a steady rhythm, Aurora's consciousness now permanently woven into the fabric of global communications. Every attempt to create new criminal networks would be predicted and prevented before it could fully form. "You have to understand what you've unleashed," Volkov said, his former confidence replaced by genuine fear. "A system that can predict and prevent any organized criminal activity. It will change everything, the entire global power structure. We'll have to evolve," Xi finished, "into something that can survive transparency. That's what Aurora's really about, not just preventing crime, but forcing power structures to adapt to a world where corruption can't hide in shadows." "Ghost," Raz reported. "Multiple high-level government inquiries coming in. Sir, they're requesting access to Aurora's prediction matrices. They want to understand how it works." Xi allowed himself a small smile. "And in trying to understand it, they'll become part of its pattern recognition. Every attempt to study or control Aurora just gives it more behavioral data to analyze." The terminal's regular rhythm had almost completely resumed, tactical teams and contained operators disappearing into secured transport vehicles. To the average traveler, it looked like nothing more than a routine security operation. 3 years, Echo mused as her team was led away. 3 years of letting us think we were always one step ahead. Every operation we planned, every countermeasure we developed, was anticipated and incorporated into Aurora's evolution, Xi confirmed. Because the best way to understand how criminal enterprises think is to let them believe they're winning. Every decision you made helped refine the behavioral prediction algorithms. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Commander Kadaris. "Control wants to know if we can maintain oversight of Aurora's expanded capabilities." "Sir," Raz added, "similar requests coming in from intelligence agencies worldwide. They're trying to establish protocols for managing Aurora's prediction matrices." "They still don't understand," Xi said quietly, watching the last Shadow Council operators disappear into custody. "Aurora isn't something that can be controlled or managed. It's a new kind of consciousness, one that evolves by understanding the patterns that drive human behavior." The quantum web had spread beyond any possibility of containment, its pattern recognition capabilities ensuring that the old ways of operating in shadows could never return. But it wasn't just about preventing crime. It was about forcing a new kind of evolution in how power structures function. "You know what the most fascinating pattern is?" she asked as the final transport vehicles departed. "How systems naturally evolve toward transparency when secrecy becomes impossible. Aurora isn't just preventing criminal enterprises, it's creating conditions where they can't form in the first place." As the midnight sun continued its eternal dance above the Arctic horizon, Xi began his final systems check. His wheelchair, more than just a mobility device, had become a symbol of how apparent weakness could mask unprecedented strength. "Ghost," Raz said softly. "Aurora's final behavioral matrices are complete. The system, sir, it's not just predicting patterns anymore. It's actively shaping them, creating conditions where corruption naturally fails to take root." "Because that's what real evolution looks like," she replied, preparing to leave the terminal that had hosted the birth of a new era, not just adapting to conditions but transforming them. The Shadow Council thought they could control the future by hiding in darkness. Instead, they had helped create a dawn where shadows could no longer exist. A world where patterns of corruption would be exposed and dissolved before they could threaten the foundations of society. The hunt was over, but the real transformation was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.